What's up, guys? It's Ben with 2020 election predictions, and as promised, today I'm going to be doing my 2020 updated Senate projections. I haven't done this in a while, but I wanted to do it at the beginning of the month. And please subscribe here if you haven't already. So, just jumping right in, I want to go into the solid Republican seats and the solid Democratic seats because I don't think there's much really to talk about these elections because they're just so solidly in some people's favor. And I don't think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on these selections because they're just so reliably Republican or reliably Democratic. Um, Lisa Murandowski, I don't think would be competitive here in Alaska, but obviously she's not on the ballot. So next up, we're going to go to the Democrats. All these small states typically are pretty reliably one way or the other. And I might be missing some states, so I will go back if I don't think I got all the states, but I think that's where I have. So next up, we're going to go to the likely states for the Republicans and the Democrats. Um, first up, I want to go to the New Hampshire. I do think New Hampshire is going to be likely Republican. Obviously, in 2016, Mary I was the incumbent Republican, and she very narrowly lost as the closest Senate election in 2016. But in 2020, the incumbent is a Democrat, and I think that with Donald Trump's unpopularity in here, he will not be able to help the Republican challenger very much. Similar to that is Minnesota, kind of similar situation. It's not Amy Klobuchar on the ballot, but another very popular incumbent Republican. And although it might be closer on the presidential scale, it typically popular incumbents do very well. Next up is New Mexico, same deal. This state on the national level typically goes to the Democrat, but there's a popular Democratic incumbent here who I think will probably win. And next up, this is going to surprise a lot of people. I'm putting Colorado in this category 2 on the Real Core Politics map. It even has it as a toss-up state, which I think is just ridiculous. John Hickenlooper is up in the polls by 14 to 17 points. I've seen. Cory Gardner won in Colorado under very, very specific circumstances, and I think he even got lucky. The incumbent Democrat in 2014 was in a lot of scandal and was just holding on barely. He was almost asked to resign. And Cory Gardner in 2014 won in a Republican wave year. So he very narrowly won by less than a point, I think. And obviously, the political winds have even changed. Colorado has been trending blue a lot. So that's why I have this in the likely Democratic column. Next up, going to the likely Republican columns. First up is Mitch McConnell's home state in Colorado. Mitch McConnell on the national level is not very popular. He's kind of the boogeyman for the left, and his Democratic challenger has garnered a lot of popularity. And Kentucky has demonstrated that they're willing to vote Democratic on the statewide level in 2019 when they elected a Democratic governor, Matt Bevin, for the first time in a long time. So, although I do think Mitch McConnell holds a strong advantage, I just want to put this in the likely column for now. Next up is South Carolina. This is another disagreement with the Real Clear Politics map. I think this is a likely Republican state. There have been a lot of polls where the Democratic challenger has been within the margin of error, even though even one poll where they were even. I do think Lindsey Graham will be able to hold on to this seat, but there's a lot of anger from the Democrats at Lindsey Graham, especially in the Kavanaugh hearings. But I think South Carolina is a pretty reliably Republican state, and Donald Trump will help Lindsey Graham to victory. Next up is Georgia. David Perdue, he's the incumbent Republican. And although Georgia is going to be closer in this election, I do think Donald Trump will still win this state, even if it's only by 2 to 4 points. And David Perdue will outperform Donald Trump just because he's a popular incumbent Republican. Next up, Alabama. And Alabama, if it were anyone else, if it were any circumstances, this would be a safe Republican state. but just because Doug Jones, the incumbent Democrat, is in office right now, he might have a little bit of an incumbency effect on the state. But I think that Tommy Tuberville or Jeff Sessions, whoever it is, will be able to win the state. If Jeff Sessions is the nominee, which I don't think he will be, the state could even move to a leans GOP state because Donald Trump just hates Jeff Sessions. But I still think Jeff Sessions is popular enough in Alabama to win the seat. Next up is Mississippi. This is also a lean GOP state. I do not think that the Democratic challenger will win, but in late 2018, in a special election, Senator Sidney Hyde Smith, only won this seat by around like 4 to 5 points in the special election. I don't think it'll be this close this go around, but I just wanted to include it there. And next up is Texas. I know Texas had a very close race in 2018 between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, but in 2020, John Cornyn is a lot more popular than Ted Cruz, and obviously having President Trump on the ballot, I think will help him. I think John Cornyn will win the state by probably between 5 to 10 points, and he might even outperform Donald Trump, even though Texas has been turning blue for a while. So next up, going to the lean Democratic states. First, I want to go to the state of Arizona, and this is going to surprise some people, maybe, but Mark Kelly is a very popular Democratic candidate. The Democrats have done very well in picking this candidate and grooming him. He's a former astronaut, and obviously everyone loves astronauts. But also Martha McSally is a very weak Republican incumbent. She was appointed. She lost the 2018 race. And although I think that Donald Trump has a good shot of keeping this state in 2020, I do think that Mark Kelly is just these are special circumstances where the Democratic candidate is so much more popular than the Republican. The next Democratic leaning state I have is the state of Michigan, which I think, and I forgot, Virginia I have as a solid Republican state. Excuse me. But next up, going to the state of Michigan, I do think this is a lean Democratic state. I've had this as a tilt Democratic state and maybe even a tilt Republican state, but just looking back at the data of the polling data, John James lost this seat in 2018, although he outperformed the Republican governor candidate. And I do think that John James will do better in this race, but I still think he will lose probably between 2 to 3 points. And honestly, I think that Donald Trump and John James will have similar outcomes in terms of their margins, because I think that John James is pretty popular among Republicans, and same with Donald Trump in the state of Michigan. But I just think Michigan, its fundamentals, the Democrats have an advantage. But this is a state to look out for because I think it could shift toward in the Republicans' favor later on. Next up, going to the lean Republican states. First, I want to go to Kansas. This is going to surprise a lot of people, but right now, Chris Kobach and Roger Marshall are in a very, very close race in the Republican primary here. If Chris Kobach wins the nomination, I think this will be a tilt Republican state. But right now they're neck and neck. If Roger Marshall wins this state, I think it will be a safe GOP seat, potentially a likely GOP seat. But we saw that Kansas is willing to vote for a Democrat on the statewide level because in 2018, when Chris Kobach was the Democratic nominee for governor on the Republican side, he lost very, very narrowly, and this surprised a lot of people. But Chris Kobach is just very, very controversial, very, very hardline on immigration and voting rights. And I think he turns off a lot of moderate Republicans, even though he has very avid supporters. So next up is Iowa. I think this is a lean Republican state. Joni Ernst, even though she's not super popular, she won in 2014 by pretty substantial margins. And I think Iowa has Donald Trump has transformed the electoral map and has shifted states like Ohio and Iowa into the Republicans' favor. And I think that Joni Ernst can ride Donald Trump's coattails to victory in the state of Iowa. So now we're going to move to the tilt states. In these states, I really think, excuse me. The special election of Georgia, I do think is a tilt or is a lean towards the Republican seat. Obviously, I did a previous video on this. It's very, very confusing, but I think that once Doug Collins becomes the eventual Republican nominee, this will move to a likely, but right now I have it as a lean just because there's so much chaos. Anyway, so now we're going to go to the tilt states. And these states really could go either way. I'm splitting hairs here, but obviously I don't want to leave any toss-ups. So let's first go to the Democratic tilting states. Right now, I think Maine, even though Susan Collins has been in Congress forever, she's been a senator since, I think, 1997 when she won the election in 1996. She's the most senior female GOP senator, but I think her vote for Brett Kavanaugh, a lot of Democrats didn't like it. There's money pouring in for Susan Collins' challenger, and I think because Maine has a slight Democratic tilt, it's voted for Democratic presidents like for as long as I've been alive and probably before that. I think that because our country's become more partisan, and in like 2016, no state voted for a different party for president and for Senate. And I think Maine could potentially go this way. Although Susan Collins is very moderate, I do not think that right now she holds an advantage. I think her incumbent holds a slight advantage. But obviously the political winds can change. I think there was a poll where her challenger was up by 7 points, but then there's also one where Susan Collins was up by 1 point. So I'm going to be looking at the polls very closely. So next up, I'm going to the state of Montana, which I think is tilting towards the Republicans right now. I think on the Let's Talk election night, they had Steve Bullock winning this race, which kind of surprised me. But I would have Montana maybe even a lean Republican state. I'm going to have to look at the polls. Obviously, Montana did vote for a Democratic senator, John Tester, the incumbent in 2018. John Tester is very popular. Steve Bullock is very popular because when governor in 2016, even when President Trump was on the ballot, Steve Bullock won re-election as governor by 10 points, which is crazy. In 2020, I think it's going to be a lot different. The Senate obviously is a lot different than the governorship, and Steve Daines is almost as popular as Steve Bullock. Montana will be a very, very cool state to look at. It's going to be very, very close, but I think the Republicans, just the fundamentals of the state, just like how Maine favors the Democrats in terms of its fundamentals, Montana favors the Republicans in terms of its fundamentals. So lastly, going to the state of North Carolina, this is where I go to school. Montana is going to be a very, very close state. Tom Tillis, the incumbent Republican, is not super popular. He's broken with Trump on some issues, and like the national emergency with the wall. Will he use emergency funding for the wall? And a lot of conservatives did not like that. He did not have a Republican challenger in the primary that would have gone to the right of him. Some people kind of see him as a moderate, but not a very popular moderate. But the NRSC, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, is fully behind him. And a lot of people predict this is going to be the most expensive race. The Democratic challenger, Cal Cunningham, is very popular. He's not super well known, but he's a pretty strong candidate, I think, on the surface. And while I think Donald Trump holds a stronger advantage than Tom Tillis, I think that at the end of the day, he'll be able to drag Tom Tillis over the finish line. So as you can see, the Senate is very, very, very close, and I think a lot of pundits and pollsters have the Republicans having an advantage in the Senate right now. I think this might be a little bit over-exaggerated because obviously it's very close, but at the end of the day, I think the Republicans are going to have a 51-49 advantage. If it were a 50-50 tie, obviously the vice president winner would be the tiebreaker, but we don't need that in this example right now. Obviously, I think this can change a lot, and I would love y'all to please comment what y'all think of my projections in the comments below. And please subscribe here if you haven't already. Thank y'all for watching, and be on the lookout for my video tomorrow.